Coming up on Tech News Weekly, I, Micah Sargent, am at the helm today with Jason out. So we kick off the show with Rene Ritchie, who talks about the antitrust concerns surrounding Apple and its App Store and what Apple has said in return. Then Rene Ritchie hops back in to talk to us about some of the new features coming in the latest version of iOS, iPadOS, macOS, tvOS. It's Apple's private relay, and he explains how it's different from a VPN and how it's the same as a VPN in some ways, and universal control. Very, very cool. Then we're joined by Brianna Wu, Executive Director of Rebellion Pack, to talk about Peloton and its new subscription service, what it is doing right and doing wrong, and all of that, before we round things out with Ian Scherr of CNET, who gives us the lowdown, the rundown, the up and down on Windows 11 and what Microsoft announced. Stay tuned.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 189, recorded Thursday, June 24th, 2021. This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Udacity. Gain in-demand tech skills in as little as 3 months with Udacity's part-time online tech courses. Visit udacity.com/twit and get 75% off any program with code TWIT75. Offer ends June 30th, 2021. And by Command Line Heroes, a podcast that tells the epic true tales of developers, programmers, hackers, geeks, and open source rebels who are revolutionizing the technology landscape. Search for Command Line Heroes anywhere you listen to podcasts and download it today. And by Melissa. With the world starting to reopen, you want to make sure that your customers' data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. Hello, and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we, of course, in this case, I, talk to and about the people making and breaking the tech news. I am Micah Sargent. My co-host Jason Howell is out this week, but we've got a jam-packed show, so we're going to get right into it. Up first, I am happy to be joined by Rene Ritchie of youtube.com/Rene Ritchie. Welcome back to the show, Rene.
Oh, I always love being here, Micah. It's always so great to talk with you.
I enjoy talking to you too, and that's why I'm glad we've got you here for just a little bit of time to talk about some new stuff from Apple in a couple of ways. So let's get right into it. The first thing that I wanted to talk to you about was Apple recently published. It's a PDF. You can find it on their site, and we'll of course include a link in the show notes that lets you to read it, of course. But it's talking about Apple's App Store and how they have always attempted to have an ecosystem of apps that can kind of be trusted and that you can count on to be what you expect them to be. And this is an interesting conversation. So I want to start by just talking about this PDF, by talking about this report before we break into kind of the whys it was put out and what's going on kind of contextually. But first, can we talk about you as, I think, a really good Apple historian, talk about how the App Store has changed over time and how maybe it compares to some of the other app stores that are out in the tech world.
Yeah, for sure. So before the App Store, famously, you had to go and find a variety of places to get mobile apps, like Palm Info Center or the Crackberry store, and there were multiple stores, of course, and they worked more like traditional stores where they took a percentage of retail sales. And I remember my Sticky Notes app cost like $50. It's a very different environment for mobile apps. And then Apple just didn't have time to make an SDK or anything approaching an SDK for the original iPhone, so there were no third-party apps. Then they did their ill-fated Sweet solution as a stopgap that didn't gap any stops. So finally, they had the SDK event, and Steve Jobs came out and announced what is essentially the modern App Store, the model for the modern App Store. And in hindsight, it's easy to see that he was really talking about a console model, what we would think of today as like what runs on a Nintendo or an Xbox or a Sony, where it's not an open market. It's not a general purpose computer system like the Mac, but they would have these categories of apps, and they wouldn't allow some things, like they would never allow porn, but they also knew that they didn't even know what was going to happen. Say this huge category called unforeseen. And you would buy an app like $10, Super Monkey Ball, and you'd use your app, and that was it. And then over time, they started adding things like in-app purchases and subscription models, and just the nature of mobile apps, the capabilities with GPS and with push notifications. They just grew and expanded until we got Instagram and Uber and what I would consider really world-changing applications. And so we got to the point now where we have Apple's App Store, we have the Google Play Store, which doesn't have as tight rules around most apps. It does around games. It's identical when it comes to games, but it's more liberal when it comes to normal apps. Like you can make purchases outside of the Google Play Store. And then, Microsoft is making their moves now. And there are other markets popping up like the Steam Store on PC. So there's really a wide gamut now of what people market and what they understand as app stores.
Yes, that's definitely the case. So, looking at what kind of someone considers to be an app store and where they go to get the different apps and services that they go after. So back to then the kind of context of this situation, because it very clearly has some ties to some of the conversations going on right now. Sonos just testified not too terribly long ago against Apple and other companies in an antitrust conversation and talked about its concerns for the platform going forward. There are ongoing cases in the EU. Germany has its own cases. There are lots of antitrust cases popping up everywhere. And even here in the United States, and one of those centers around Apple's App Store. So the positioning of this bit of information, this report about the App Store, I think it's coupled with kind of an outreach that's going on right now, where you do have different Apple folks having interviews and talking to different people about the integrity of the App Store. So, is a PDF that is available to the public? How much do you think that actually will impact the case for Apple? Or I guess maybe if you could sort of try to glean what Apple's goal is with this PDF and maybe with some of these stories and interviews. What's Apple's goal in doing that? Does it help them in the courts? Does it help them in the court of public opinion? How does that kind of play into its side of this story?
Yeah, I think this is something that I've been dealing a lot with personally. And you know me, Micah, I take a lot of these things. I try to look at the empathy side of this and the consideration side of this. And I think one of the problems we've had historically is that it's been a bunch of computer people talking about it. It's been people like us, tech journalists, tech Twitter, tech YouTubers. And because we're so used to traditional computers, of course, everything should be a traditional computer. Why can't I put my app, the app that I want on the device I bought and paid for? I should be able to do anything I want with it. And I think, from our point of view, that is absolutely true. But then we have Android and we have Windows and macOS and Linux and all the other flavors of Unix that work exactly in line with those expectations, that let us do anything we want with them. And the general public, and I know some people look at that dismissively and say, oh yeah, Ma and Pa, the soccer parents. But they really only have iOS and Chrome OS as anything approaching a considerate, like a simplistic, but not in a bad way, operating system. And I'm not talking about people who, I'm not saying they're dumb. I'm not saying that they're limited. They're geniuses. They just do not care at all about the technology. To them, that's just work. They just want a tool that they can do their business on. They don't want to have to babysit it. They don't have to manage it. They don't want it to be yet another job. They just want it to always be there and work. And I think a significant point of the value, why iOS devices, iPhones and iPads are so popular, is because they're not traditional computers. The App Store is not an open computing marketplace. They can just go find an app, download it, not have to worry about uninstalling it, not have to worry about malware, not have to worry about whether it's a bootlegged copy of an app or an app that's going to end up being ransomware. They really can press a button, try an app, don't like it, delete it, one shot. And that is a huge, huge relief of anxiety and stress and intimidation for them. And I think what Apple is doing is putting data behind that here, because we talk about the potential for malware or the potential for ransomware. And Apple's trying to say, well, these are the cases when those things have happened, because otherwise, the plural of anecdote is just never data. So you have to get some data behind it. And I think what Apple's trying to do here is to take those arguments, the arguments that have been made in favor of the App Store, and just put their ability to do research and their ability to fund research behind that.
Aha, that makes sense. Yeah. So this is stuff that, could be referenced at any time, and it's, being made available to the public so that we can learn about it as well and disseminate the information that way. But regardless, having that information is useful in any argument they make anywhere. What are your thoughts about where this is going to go? I mean, there are so many cases popping up now, and it does make one wonder what we might be seeing in the coming year, in the coming couple of years, as Apple argues against a more open app store that is not as regulated, is not as trusted, in Apple's words. Do we think we're going to get to that place? And if so, is it bifurcated? Although bifurcated is probably not enough, because it would be different in different regions. Yeah. I mean, are we going to look at an app store in China, and that app store is different from the one in the United States and in the EU, et cetera, et cetera? How do you think these court cases are going to go? And I know this is all just speculation, but I'm just curious from your standpoint, what you think might change or might not.
No, yeah, it's a huge philosophical question. And a lot of it revolves around differences in interpretation of the word choice. Like, is having choice the ability to have choice on the iPhone, or is it the ability to have the choice between Android and iPhone? Like, should you be able to sideload on the iPhone, or should your choice be, I want to sideload, therefore I choose Android instead of iPhone? And people who don't want to sideload or have any of the issues, and some people think, you just don't have to sideload, but it's not true. In a world where sideloading exists, you come under enormous pressure to do it, from your school, from your work, from that Epic who won't put Fortnite on the store and is going to demand that you sideload it. There's no way to escape it once it exists. So should you be able to choose to not have to worry at all about side loading? And then you have, exactly to your point, the provincialization of all this technology, where France and Australia and China and the US and other places are making all these very different laws. And we might look from the US at China and say, oh, we don't agree with their laws, but China doesn't agree with American law, and other EU countries don't agree with American law. There are fundamental differences in the way, like, the U.S. famously has a First Amendment where Europe believes that the role of the government is to control speech. There's huge differences in how all of this plays out. And I think one of the issues is that Apple, especially recently, has made services revenue such a linchpin. Like, they promised Wall Street that they would double it in a scant few years, and the App Store has always been the primary revenue driver for services, that they just did everything they could to maximize App Store revenue. And I think that put them on the wrong path here. And if they'd been willing to do, as that Phil Schiller email recently surfaced, Phil Schiller email showed us, if they'd been willing to set, okay, this is enough profit. Steve Jobs said break even plus a little bit more. If, once we're making a few $1 billion off it, that's it. The rest we're going to return to developers and just start ratcheting down that rate. I think sentiment would be really, really different. And I think it would be much harder for antitrust people to, in some cases, imagine, in some cases, actually prosecute the cases that they believe they have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll definitely be keeping an eye on this. I mean, it's kind of hard to miss as all these different sides keep clapping back, so to speak, and everybody's bringing the receipts to the table, spilling the tea, all those other words, reading each other for filth. It's all happening. But let us take a quick break before we come back with more from Rene Ritchie, this time on some new features that'll be coming in iOS 15. Rene's done a really cool deep dive on some of these and is talking about them. But first, I do want to tell you about Udacity, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. Udacity offers a unique part-time online education program that's geared for those who are looking to take their tech knowledge to the next level with specialized and exciting content. Udacity offers the latest cutting-edge nano degree programs, many of which are not available anywhere else, such as AI, deep learning, flying car and autonomous flight engineer. Yeah, that's on there. Intro to self-driving cars, machine learning engineer, and robotics software engineer. To create the course content, Udacity partners with industry leaders such as Microsoft, Google, IBM, AWS, and more, and selects team leads at top companies to be instructors. If you love learning and are always looking to know more new tech stuff, then Udacity is for you. Udacity can help you master the latest tech skills and techniques. Courses are project-based with active learning that covers cutting-edge technology and lets you test your knowledge. Homework and projects are reviewed by qualified professionals. Yes, real qualified professionals. You'll have real human feedback and reviews with access to mentors 24/7. Udacity's flexible schedule means you can put in just 5 to 10 hours a week, working at your own pace, any time of the day or night, and graduate in as little as 3 months. The World Economic Forum estimates that 75 million jobs will be replaced by automated processes within the next 3 years. Udacity prepares its students for the jobs of the future. Over 14 million people in over 240 countries now use Udacity. You can check out their detailed course listings at udacity.com. Once you enroll as a student in a specific course offering, you'll be prompted to view the online course as well as complete a series of projects and support courses. They offer flexible payment options, and you can learn at your own pace and schedule. Udacity also has free courses you can check out. Does your team need to master cutting-edge technologies like data science, AI, and cybersecurity? Well, with Udacity for Enterprise, you can upskill your entire workforce with real-world project-based learning. Be sure to check out the Enterprise section of Udacity's website today. Get the in-demand tech skills you need to advance your career. Visit udacity.com/twit and get 75% off any program with code TWIT75. Offer ends June 30th, 2021. That's udacity.com/twit and enter TWIT75. Alrighty, folks, we are back from the break to continue our conversation with Rene Ritchie. This time I wanted to talk to Rene. So of course, Apple's recently had its WWDC, that's the Worldwide Developer Conference, and at it typically, and this time as well, announced several new updates and features for its operating systems. Rene, you've been covering them on your YouTube channel, youtube.com/Rene Ritchie. And there were a couple that are, I think, particularly interesting in general, but particularly interesting in your case, because one of the things I love about your coverage is you always try to get as much information as possible and then share that information in a way that is clear and understandable to anybody who's kind of consuming it. And so the same case goes for something that folks might not quite understand on the face of it, and that is Apple's private relay technology. Yeah. So I was hoping you could start by describing what private relay is, and then we'll kind of get into your YouTube video about private relay.
Sure. So private relay is Apple's new not a VPN. And I think everyone keeps stressing it's not a VPN because it's really not a VPN. It does have some VPN-like characteristics, some Tor-like characteristics, but the whole idea is to separate who you are from where you want to go on the web, so that the places that you go, the conduits that you use never know who you are, and the places never know who you are, and the things that you use never know where you want to go. So basically, nobody no longer has any perfect knowledge of your activities on the web.
And how is that different from a VPN?
So a VPN can do that, but a VPN is really designed as a tunnel. It basically creates a secure tunnel from you to another server, and then you act as if you're that other server. And that has some things that private relay can't do. For example, you can use that to geo-hop. So if you want to watch Netflix France, or you want to watch Hulu in the US from outside the US, you can use that by tunneling into another server. Wow. And that also lets you do things like act like you're a local user on that server. So if you're updating your iPhone with the latest version of TwitOS and you're only allowed to do that from inside the studio, you can VPN to the studio and install it locally. So it has those sorts of benefits and some downsides. Like sometimes people just sit at the end of the server and suck in all the data and try to see who's using it. Where what Apple's doing is, basically, the minute you try to make a web connection through Safari, they wrap everything up in encryption and they send that to an Apple relay. And that means not even your ISP, not even your internet service provider knows where it is that you're going. They just know that you're going to Apple. And once you get to Apple, Apple sends you to a second relay. So they substitute your actual IP address for a temporary IP address. You can choose if that's local. Like, for example, you could choose San Francisco Bay Area, or you could choose just my country based on time zone. So you could choose just West Coast. And you might want local for things like where's a close restaurant to me, or you want to order something. So you might want some amount of locality, or you might want none. You're like, I just want people to know at all where I am. You can choose that in settings. And then it gives that fake IP address and sends that to a second relay server. And that second relay server unencrypts the web address you want to go to. So now it no longer knows who you are because all it has is that temporary email address, but it knows where you want to go to, which is something Apple's relay didn't know because it was encrypted when it was sent out.
Wow.
And then that second relay connects you to the web. And so that website only knows the temporary only knows that temporary IP address, and any sort of data vampires, like the big tech companies, the data brokers, none of them know who you are. And the reason that's important is that right now, if you connect from your home, it's like, oh, Micah is coming to my website. Oh, this IP address also went to Amazon and used this email address to buy tea, and also went to maybe this onesie website, but then also went to. Also ordered a catalog from Canon, and now I have his physical address. And start putting all these data profile pictures together to you. And I know he's also been in the Twit studio. And now I know where he works, and I know he ordered lunch from Chipotle Burrito Burger, every day. And they start making these incredibly in-depth profiles based on aggregating. And they also make deals with data brokers where they're like, oh, now we know his credit cards and we know what he bought in the real world. And they get these that's why people think that they're listening in on our microphones, because we can't imagine they know this much about us, but they do, because they can put together all this information. And what Apple's doing is essentially preventing them from doing that. They don't have that single piece of data to tie our activities together, because the IP addresses they assign us are random and rotating. And that means they're just getting sporadic, chaotic data from them and nothing to sort of piece together these profiles.
Now, of course, in the early days, as it's still in beta, you may run into some issues. I have the betas installed on my devices because I'm ridiculous, and also because I need to test this stuff out. And I ended up switching off iCloud Private Relay on my devices because I was having trouble accessing some sites. But again, that's because this is in beta. So when I ask this, the reason why I bring that is because I want the context here of the question I'm asking is, what are the performance implications in a world where this is not a beta, a beta feature, where this is, fully wrapped? Do you know anything about because making those two hops versus a direct connection versus a VPN where you're tunneling, how do those two hops and the encryption in place impact it? And can I use iCloud Private Relay with, there are a lot of new systems coming out, or a lot of new services coming out for game streaming, for example. Is that going to be an issue when I'm trying to stream games? Or what about when I'm out and I want to turn on or off the lights in my home? Is it going to take longer for that to happen due to these hops? Do we know anything about the performance implications of iCloud Private Relay?
Yeah, so there are a few things that help with that. One is that iCloud Private Relay is limited right now. It only works in the Safari browser over non-encrypted web traffic. So if you were trying to send something to a server over port 80 that wasn't encrypted, Apple would wrap that up just, as a security measure, and also some very specific things in apps. But apps are aware of it. And for example, if you turn on a VPN, it turns off Private Relay because it's not only required, but it doesn't want to have any sort of collisions there. So depending on how the apps and the services work, it should be transparent. In worst case, if you do find an issue, you can turn it off. But I think by the time we get to September, October, almost all of that should be ironed out. The bigger question about what those two hops mean, anytime you add complexity to a system, you add some form of extra error potential. So Apple's server could go down. Like Apple right now is the only first-party relay on that system. So if Apple goes down, which has happened, like iCloud has gone down in the past, you would not be resolving anything through Apple Private Relay. Also, the second-party server, Apple rotates between them, so you get different ones. You get basically a bunch of tokens that redeem different servers. So you could get Cloudflare, you could get Fastly, Akamai. And if any of those are down, you might die at that point in the relay. They don't go down often, but everything does eventually go down. Right now, it looks like Private Relay fails quietly. So if anything goes wrong, it just stops working, which some people like because their connection will never get interrupted. And some people hate because they feel like they don't know if they're on Private Relay anymore. But again, it's still in beta. So a lot of that is going to get ironed out. Theoretically, there should be minimal impact because the encryption itself is so hardware accelerated. Now it's not even really a thing, but you are introducing those 2 stops of potential latency into any connection. So that's why I think it's being set up to use in Safari and not being set up to use in like a bunch of different apps that you might want high performance for.
That makes sense. Yeah. As I said, it's a really cool thing, and it's helpful to know what you just described there, the difference between the VPN and this, and those 2 data hops that you talked about. Let's talk now about another.
Can I add one quick thing in there?
Oh, yeah, please do.
Yeah. Some people might worry that it's not used in apps, but basically anytime you're using an app and you have an account, they have perfect knowledge of you anyway. Google or Facebook or the game service or the whatever photo app, if I'm logged in, it has my email address. It needs all those things. So that's why there's no sense in anonymizing you to any app that you willingly give your account to. Just in case people are worried about that.
Yes, that's good to know, and important to know. OneBlocker recently released an update for its app that includes a firewall that you can set up to work with apps instead of. So OneBlocker is typically a Safari, Safari ad blocker, content blocker, but they added a new feature where you basically set up it's as if it's a VPN, but that's just where everything kind of gets stored that does network filtering in your iOS or iPadOS system. And by enabling it, then it will keep those apps from contacting a list of things, which are most of the time different communications for app crashes and stuff. So a really cool feature that OneBlocker has. And so I tend to have these different things enabled as needed. And it's good to have that privacy, particularly because it's helpful when my partner is complaining about how the apps are listening to him, and I have to explain and go, no, and then try to come up with, okay, here's why they know this much about you without listening to you. I promise it's real. I promise it's true. So I'm looking forward to Private Relay to be turned on all of our devices so that no longer happens, and we're no longer thinking our devices are listening to us. Moving on to the next one right quick. It's universal control, and this was the feature that did make me clutch my pearls and do a little bit of gasping during the Apple event or the Apple keynote, because it is a way to move between your different Apple devices with one trackpad and keyboard, or one mouse and keyboard, and therefore be able to control and drag and drop things from an iPad to a Mac and back again, there and back again. Tell us about universal control, and in particular, those Rene Ritchie tidbits you've come across.
Yeah, so I mean, kind of it's part of the continuity system, which is the technology Apple introduced in iOS 8. And it's been one of my favorites. It's what allows AirDrop and handoff, and most recently Sidecar. A lot of these technologies that are just really, really convenient and just show the value of the Apple ecosystem if you have multiple devices. And this really builds off of Sidecar, where Sidecar took the Mac and turned your iPad into a secondary display. This lets you use your Mac and leave the iPad as the iPad, but still control it. Still use your Mac keyboard and your Mac mouse or trackpad to control the iPad as if you were using a Magic Keyboard on the iPad. It does have to be Mac initiated right now. You can't start it on an iPad, so you need at least one iPad in that chain. But then you can you need at least one Mac in that chain. But then you can add one iPad, you can add two iPads, you can add an iPad and a Mac. So you can have 3 devices and just control all of them with that one trackpad. And it basically works like any continuity technology, where it uses Bluetooth to establish a connection, make sure you're logged in to the same account, uses time of flight to make sure both devices are physically close to each other. No one's trying to person in the middle attack you. And then it switches on a peer-to-peer Wi-Fi. Some people call it Wi-Fi Direct. I think that's a trademark name, but it's a peer-to-peer Wi-Fi connection. And then it just secures that, and everything goes back and forth. And it feels like those displays are just extra computer monitors that you can use your mouse and keyboard on. It's super convenient.
And the thing to understand about this, and you could helpfully describe to people, what is the difference between, this was one of the things that I tried to explain because I saw some folks kind of going, I thought we already had Sidecar, and this is not like Sidecar. Can you explain how it's not like Sidecar, which is the technology that lets you use your iPad as an external display for your Mac?
Yeah, it's the same sort of foundation. So the requirements are the same. You have to have a Mac that can do the same things. Basically, it has to have latest generation Bluetooth, and it has to have an Apple accelerated chip like a T2 or an M1 to get that sort of the connectivity that they really need from it. But Sidecar really is a second display for your Mac. It turns the iPad into a macOS monitor, where this lets the other computer still be that computer. So if you have, for example, Procreate on your iPad, you're not switching that to your Mac display. You're leaving it. It's Procreate. You're just using your Mac mouse to control Procreate, to close windows, open windows, switch palettes, pick up an image you drew and drag it over to your Mac Universe things between your iOS and Mac devices. One of my favorite features, and this sort of puts an interface on it where you literally pick up a picture or a bit of text, drag it over and drop it in place with, not abstractly, but with physical manipulation. And that works, again, if you have two Macs, one Mac isn't taking over that display. You can do that now with AirPlay to Mac. So like if you've been jonesing for your target display mode fix, you can do that with AirPlay to Mac. Both Macs remain separate, so you can have two separate applications running with two separate data sets behind them and really work on either one or drag and drop them together. It's really cool stuff.
Yeah, it's very, very neat. Well, folks should absolutely go check out your YouTube videos on these two features. Lots of good stuff there. And I want to thank you, of course, for joining me today. If folks want to follow you online and make sure they can go find all of that great work, where do they go to do so?
You can go to youtube.com/Rene Ritchie, twitter.com/Rene Ritchie. And of course, each and every week, I'm privileged to be on Mac Break Weekly with Leo and Andy and Alex Tuesdays. I'm going to get this right. 11 a.m. Pacific. Mm-hmm. I have to do time zone math.
Yeah, that's when it's meant to start.
Perfect. We try. Sometimes we have chat to do before the show starts.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Rene. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Micah.
Have a good day. All righty, folks. Up next, what the heck is going on with Peloton? But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Command Line Heroes. Love Command Line Heroes. Command Line Heroes, it's a podcast that shares with you the epic true tales of developers, geeks, programmers, hackers, and open source rebels who have, and frankly still are, revolutionizing the technology landscape. And did we mention Season 7 is out now? Season 7 of Command Line Heroes explores a pivotal year. The year is 1995. It was the start of the dot-com boom, but a lot of things had to come together for the internet to succeed. So meet the internet class of 95. First, long before you could hop on GoDaddy to grab a domain name, there was a woman you'd have to call, Elizabeth Jake Feinler. She was the keeper of all domains. Episode 1 of the season features a conversation with a woman herself now in her 90s about how she managed the internet and how her team needed to create the DNS. Web design, it took a while to become a career, but it got a big boost in 95. When the Batman Forever website launched to promote the movie, it showed people what was possible on the web. This episode features pioneers like Jeffrey Zeldman, the godfather of web design, who recount the shift that forever changed the face of the web. 1995 was a pivot point, the moment when the internet went from academic curiosity to global phenomenon. Command Line Heroes is hosted by developer and podcaster Saranyat Barak. And of course, we at Twit got a sneak peek of Season 7. And boy, howdy, this is a really interesting one. You know, we kind of, at this point, take the web for granted. But knowing where it went from kind of this nerdy project that invented the web, a lot of people know that story, but they don't know the story of how the web kind of went from that to what it is today. And this season talks about that point, the point before we had our Tumblrs and our Facebooks and our Twitters. And it's a really, really fascinating season. I know a lot of folks will play these for their kids and listen along with them. And you have to go to the website and check out the artwork. They always create new artwork for each season, and it's gorgeous and themed. And I can't say enough about how great Command Line Heroes is. Check out all of the incredible stories from season 7 today. Search for Command Line Heroes anywhere you listen to podcasts. That's Command Line Heroes. Download it today. Our thanks to Command Line Heroes for their support. All right, so you may have heard a thing or two about a company called Peloton. Peloton is a fitness company that makes fitness machines, and a lot of people who really love their Pelotons and love to talk about their Pelotons. But there was an issue with a more recent addition to the lineup, a Peloton Treadmill. And because of some problems with the system, unfortunately, there were deaths and injuries that resulted from the Peloton Treadmill. And that resulted in a conversation between Peloton and the bureau in charge of safety and trying to recall this device. And it got pretty messy. And then Peloton did something else. Joining us today to talk about that something else. And I think about sort of services and machines and things having pay-as-you-go subscriptions is the executive director of the Rebellion Pack. It's Brianna Wu. Welcome to this show for the first time. Welcome back to Twitch,
Micah,
Brianna.
it's so good to see you. How are you doing?
I am hanging in there in fiery California.
I love your background. It's so colorful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I have to admit, I'm one of these people that adores their Peloton. I am part of the cult. They give you a robe and a mask. It's a whole initiation ritual. We can't get into that. But I found myself in the middle of this controversy, really, because I was one of the people that brought it to light. So do you just want me to explain it from the beginning to your listeners? Do you want to get back to it? How do you want to tell this story?
That would be great. So talk about your experience with it for sure. And as you said, we'll leave off the robe and the mask, but the rest of it, we'd love to hear.
I'll go put it on if I need to. So as you said, this situation with the Peloton Tread was very, very serious. And a critique that we had of Peloton Tread and Peloton in general of it was their I think it's fair to say a bit of an evasive response to it. They weren't really stand up in communicating with people about this flaw. And to be really clear to your listeners, they agreed to a voluntary recall. I do believe that they're sending people out to tread owners' houses if they don't want a full refund, and they're modifying the treadmill to make it safe, and they're adding a Peloton lock to it, which is a combination code that you have to use to activate it. So that's kind of been the state of things. Peloton, the forum on Facebook, really caught on fire on Monday because a woman that owned a tread was writing that she had been completely locked out of her Peloton. She could not use her $4,500 treadmill at all. And what had happened was Peloton had patched her treadmill without her permission to lock her out and said, hey, you don't currently have a subscription. So even though you've had this ability to use your $4,500 treadmill as just a treadmill, we are going to lock you out of that from now on and not let you do that. But good news, we're going to give you 3 free months of our $40 a month service. So you'll get 3 free months, and then to use your $4,500 device, you'll just have to pay us $40 a month. How does that seem to you, Micah? That seems a little shady personally to me.
Yeah, and can I get some clarification on the?
Yes, please.
Is you mentioned that they would come and they would update the software and it would do a pin. You'd be able to use a pin to turn it on. Right. Is the pin tied to that subscription service, or can you have that independently?
So that's actually a very perceptive question, because that seems to be the issue at hand, that you can enter in your PIN only for the live classes or you can only set that feature up if you have an active membership. You cannot do that if you don't have an active membership, which I find very sketchy because they had no ethical problem, patching this woman's device without her permission to lock her out. And, this is just the Android SDK, so it doesn't really seem like a heavy lift to just, put that on both sides of it. So I had a tweet that went fairly viral. I have to tell you, it's a wonderful day for a woman to go viral on Reddit and to have all the comments be positive and supporting her. That happened to me, which was
that's
amazing. Yes. People really not liking this situation because it looks, I don't want to, ascribe motivation to Peloton, but it certainly looks like they're using the death of a child to basically charge you to use your own device. I mean, does that make sense to you?
That's exactly what it feels. Once you clarified that point, that's exactly what it feels like. It sounds like you're saying that in order to have the ultimate safety, you need to subscribe to the service. That's
exactly.
Not a good look.
Right. So I'm going to actually break some news today on your show. This has not been reported. I want to kind of tell you the blow-by-blow of the drama about how Peloton was forced to address this week. So this story started blowing up on Monday after I had a tweet that went fairly viral about it. I do believe Business Insider was the first journalistic organization to look into it and to write a story. They flat out asked Peloton, will you commit to sometime in the future making it so people can use the Just Run feature even without a subscription? Because what Peloton had done is they'd used this kind of marketing politician language that people just hate, where you're not saying anything that's not true, but you're crafting it to be deliberately misleading, because they're using phrases like, at this time, you can't use this feature. Currently, for the time being, making it sound like this feature was going to come and they were going to reinstate your ability to use your treadmill to just run. You had journalists, very good journalists, that asked them directly, will you commit to actively letting us use our devices we paid for without a subscription? Peloton would not comment on this on Monday. They would not comment on this on Tuesday to PC Magazine. The Verge got involved. Vox Media, they did a story. And in late Tuesday night, Peloton wrote those reporters to update the story and said, you know what? We will actually answer your question now. We will commit to changing this in the future to let you do that. So I really want to give people online credit. Your pressure on Peloton, your frustration in calling this out, I believe is why we kind of pushed back on this really exploitive model, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's hard to read behind the between the lines, rather, or kind of suss out what's going on here. I am just kind of flabbergasted. What is the benefit? What do you think the thinking was for Peloton in terms of not just doing this? Why, especially you talked about, not super heavy lifting, given that it's the Android SDK, that it is that, someone died. And so doing anything you can to try and go to help with that would be good. And also the fact that they were facing a recall. What do you think was the thinking for even holding out at all on this? Is this just a company that its culture is what's going on here? I guess is the question I am asking.
I think that's such a perceptive question, Micah. This is my theory, and this is what a lot of people on Reddit particularly said. I want to be very clear. This is my speculation. I don't have any evidence of this, but this is what makes sense to me. I think many of us with careers have been in situations where our lawyers have advised us that certain things are legally safest to do, right? And what happens when you sign the Peloton Peloton membership, there's a clause in there that people on Reddit found that said, if I continue using this treadmill, I indemnify Peloton from legal action. I believe it agrees to arbitration, or it indemnifies them completely. It basically gives them a legal out. So I believe that, if you have no subscription with them, you're not currently in any kind of legal arrangement with Peloton. You've just agreed to use this device. So I don't think this was the software team not implementing this feature. I think what makes sense to me is, it's under a voluntary recall, and the lawyers got involved. And the lawyers said it would be safest for us, and it would expose us to the least amount of liability if you just locked people out of this entirely, which I have to say, if that is true, it's really gross, because if you read their press statement, they're saying, oh, this is for the children. This is for safety. And I just personally don't find that credible. If this was really about safety, they would make adding that to the Just Run feature a development priority.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%. This, of course, is one of the more, I think, egregious examples of a subscription kind of playing against what the market wants, what consumers want. But I wanted to talk to you briefly, given your vast knowledge of kind of the, now I can't even think of the word, but the sort of legal side, the public policy side of things with companies. So Sonos is one example where at one point, Sonos speakers, they had set it up to where they weren't going to be supporting the original Sonos speakers anymore. And they put in place this policy where the speakers ended up getting kind of shut down completely. And they did roll back on that after some public pressure. Another company that I'm familiar with is the Wink Home Hub. It was a home hub that had like a Zigbee radio in it and a Z-Wave radio in it and all these different things that would let people connect all of their smart home devices. They introduced a subscription after they charged for the bridge originally as the only cost. And then when they introduced a subscription, consumers were not happy about it. And now Wink is all but kaput. And so I'm curious kind of from your side of things, there's always this undertow of people reminding us time and time again that we don't own the devices that we have purchased. Exactly. And I just am curious about your thoughts on that when it comes to software versus hardware and these devices that we bring into our homes. Do you feel more toward the side of things where we own our devices and get to do with them what we choose? Or is there some understanding, given that you are a developer as well, of that kind of not owning the software side?
Well, I think it depends. I think generally speaking, if you're providing a service, I think Peloton, their live classes, I can personally tell you it's more than worth $40 a month to me, right? I had reconstructive knee surgery this year. It was incredibly helpful for me coming back from that and getting back to health. I don't think anyone is expecting Peloton to provide these classes for free. I do think it's true that compared to other countries, the United States has very lax consumer protections. And I think that all things being equal, I think we find ourselves owning the things we buy less and less and falling into exploitive pricing models more and more. And Micah, something I would really love to talk to you about with this is the Peloton community's response. And like I said at the beginning, I'm a member of this cult. I love my Peloton dearly. I use it every day. But if you look at the comments of the community here, it's very similar to we both love Apple. It's kind of similar to the Apple community, which will instinctually defend everything that Apple does. Yeah. And I've thought so much about this. Why is this that the Peloton community is clamoring for Peloton to really push this pricing model I find abusive forward? And I think what it is, both of us have podcast shows. Like we both run into people that feel like they know us because they listen to us every week.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think that because you spend so much time interacting with their wonderful instructors, I think some of us feel that if you're insulting Peloton, you're like insulting our friend, right?
Yeah,
and it's not Olivia Amato that stayed up late coding this feature. It's the Peloton dev team and the Peloton legal team. And I think it's really important that, if we truly want things like Apple, Android, Microsoft, Peloton, if we want them to succeed, we need to be able to have space to reasonably criticize decisions that they make. Because if we're not, the question is if people 5 years from now are going to find Peloton to be a good value. Because $40 a month is a lot of money. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Brianna, that was an incredibly insightful observation there regarding, because when you look at it that way, these instructors that you feel like you have a personal connection to and who you feel are also helping you day in, day out, you feel like they're on the line. That I didn't think about it that way. So it's really nice to have that look of things.
Absolutely.
I wish we had more time to chat. Unfortunately, I am going to have to say goodbye, but I want to thank you for joining us today for Tech News Weekly for the first time. And of course, folks can check out your great work with the Rebellion Pack. But if folks want to follow you online and maybe come across your next viral tweet, where do they go to do so?
I'm mostly active on Twitter. You can follow me there at Brianna Wu. And you got to let me plug Rocket, which has two of your friends on it, including me, Simone de Rochefort and Christina Warren. So we're over on Relay, and we are a barrel full of monkeys.
It is one of the best shows in the podcast ecosystem for sure. Rocket on Relay. All right, Brianna Wu, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Up next, Microsoft announced Windows 11. What can folks expect from the next gen OS? We'll answer that in just a bit. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by Melissa. With the world starting to reopen, you will want to get reacquainted with your customers, which means you want to make sure that your customer data hasn't gone bad. Did you know that 30% of customer data goes bad each year? Well, stop throwing your money away and let Melissa help you. Melissa makes sure your data is accurate and current so you reach the right customers. Their tools have helped businesses maintain fresh data for over 35 years. That's why more than 10,000 businesses trust the address experts. With a renewal rate of over 85%, companies love Melissa, and they will work for you too. You can verify addresses, emails, phone numbers, and names in real time with Melissa. Melissa's global address verification service verifies addresses for 240 plus countries and territories at the point of entry. Tired of having duplicate customer information in your database? Well, with Melissa's data matching, you can eliminate clutter and duplicates, increase accuracy of the database, and reduce postage and mailing costs. Get the information that completes your customer profiles better. Add consumer demographic info to your records, such as marital status or social media handles. Melissa's flexible deployment options offer different platforms to suit any preference, business size, or budget. With flexible on-premise web service, secure FTP processing, and software as a service delivery options. Melissa also has their new Lookups app on iOS and Google to search addresses, names, and more right at your fingertips. Melissa continually undergoes independent security audits to reinforce their commitment to data security, privacy, and compliance requirements, as SOC 2, HIPAA, and GDPR compliant. Melissa's Global Support Center also offers 24/7 world-renowned support if you sign up for a service agreement. Inquire today. Melissa is still supporting communities and qualifying essential workers during COVID-19. See if your organization qualifies for 6 months of free service by applying online at melissa.com. We'd also like to congratulate Melissa for being named a leader in address verification by G2 Crowd in their spring 2021 report. Make sure your customer contact data is up to date. Try Melissa's APIs in the developer portal. It's easy to log on, sign up, and start playing in the API sandbox 24/7. Get started today with 1,000 records cleaned for free at melissa.com/twit. That's melissa.com/twit. patreon.com/twit. Thanks so much, Melissa. Alrighty, folks. The Windows 11 live event took place this morning. They just announced Windows 11, and I am pumped to say that we have CNET's own Ian Scher here to join us to give us a rundown of what Windows announced. Welcome back to the show, Ian.
How you doing?
I am doing well. I know we don't have you for too long, so I would love to get right into it. Of course, the event kicked off, and we got a very almost stern, very sort of moodily sincere Panos Panay talking about what Windows 11 was going to provide. Yes, exactly, as is normal. And this was all about, the different events kind of have keywords, and this one was all about home and connect. And can you tell us what are some of the big features of Windows 11 that really stood out to you, and maybe some that were shocking or that were a surprise at the very least?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the design is really interesting. I keep thinking about the start menu has been on the bottom left of a ton of people's screens since 1995, and now they're going to move it to the middle, which is very phone and tablet-like. So that alone is going to be a huge shift for a lot of people who are, not used to Windows changing this much. The designs in general, I think, make it look a lot more modern. But the biggest changes actually are under the hood. They're doing stuff like making it work a lot better with Android apps. So suddenly, on top of there being a ton of Windows apps, now there's going to be support for Android, which in and of itself is going to be very interesting, right? Different games, different apps, different capabilities are going to be coming into these computers. They're also making it so that Microsoft Teams, this video chat service that started off as this kind of enterprisey office thing, it became really big during the pandemic, as did Zoom. And so now they're building it into Windows in a very similar way that Apple has built FaceTime into Macs. But unlike FaceTime, where you only have it on an Apple computer, in Windows you can have a Teams on an iPhone, on an Android, on any device. So they're, in a way, trying to take on FaceTime. And then probably the other thing that really stood out to me, at least, was their integration with Xbox. The Xbox team has always been that kind of, other part of Microsoft in a building over on the other side of campus. And they've never really, truly integrated it into Windows. And they're actually building like a special Xbox app, and they're trying to make it work a lot better with all the games. They say it's going to have a lot of the features that the Xboxes have had, like auto HDR, which makes older games look a lot better, and all of these types of things. So, together it all really is about refinement, I feel, but also trying to update a lot of the visuals, make it feel a lot more modern.
Yeah. The modernity, I guess, of the platform was interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about the Android stuff, because that was something that stood out, and it was interesting how little. Twit's Leo Laporte and Windows Weekly's Mary Jo Foley and Paul Thurrott all covered the event this morning, and they all remarked about how little time was spent on talking about these apps coming to to Windows. Do you think that's because it's via the Amazon App Store versus the Google Play Store? Is that why there wasn't as much attention paid, or is it just because they don't see it as such a big feature? I guess, is this should folks be looking forward to a long-term support of Android apps on Windows, which would be kind of the first case, or is it just that, and also we did this, just kind of an added feature that they saw?
I'm going to be curious to see that myself. I think that making it available in the first place is pretty interesting. I mean, they've been playing with Android apps on Microsoft Windows for a long time, so they must have some data about how successful it's been. And the fact that they're still willing to invest in it says something, I think. But the reality is, you say, a lot of people know what Android is, right? It's the most popular software on the planet. So, you don't need a lot of explanations for what it is. Oh, I can play, Words with Friends Android edition now on my computer. Great, right? And I think that what they really wanted to focus on a lot more was the things that's going to make it special, right? To make Windows special. And the reality is that they have ceded the floor over the last 6 years in a lot of way to people like Apple and Google, who have really taken up the mantle of being, the places that are really focused on design, right? I mean, Google's event just a couple of months ago was all about the material you, right? Making it feel a lot more personal. Apple has been pushing these ideas really strong and bringing its Apple and bringing its Macs and its iPhones together visually in a lot of ways. Microsoft is kind of just sat there, continue being Microsoft. So I think in a lot of ways they wanted to focus on how they've really thought through, here is how we're going to offer something different and not just here's another update to Windows 10.
That's interesting. I have to say, it reminded me a little bit of, and people will probably get mad, but reminded me a little bit visually of Windows Vista, which is one of the least popular versions of Windows.
Hopefully with better security.
Yes, better everything. The translucency and the sort of animations and all of that they were focusing on here. But the big thing, I think, is just the idea that this works across all sorts of work. What's the word I'm looking for? It works across all sorts of contexts. Can we talk about kind of context switching between your work life, your home life, your gaming life, which could be separate, I guess, from your home life, and how Windows is supposed to be helping with that?
Yeah, I remember talking to a lot of people, and I've learned there are a lot of weird ways people use Windows, right? I mean, everyone does things differently and they think differently. There are people out there who have different accounts on their computers for when they're gaming, when they're at work, and all the apps are different on the desktop, and maybe it looks different, and they got a different wallpaper, all sorts of stuff. Well, Microsoft wants to make that a little easier. So what they're doing is they're actually making it so you can set up kind of a whole setup of the apps you want to run, the documents you want to have open, all these things, and kind of connect it all together and make it really easy for you to be able to just switch into work mode. And I think it's really smart. It's something that they've been playing with already with their timeline feature, which is not very broadly used from what I can tell. I've never really heard many people talk about it outside of Microsoft, but the idea that you can have kind of a bunch of your different documents and websites kind of put together and easily accessible across all of your devices. Now that they're really pushing heavily on this, I think it's going to be an opportunity for them to say, look, we realize a lot of you are working at home, and we realize a lot of you are not going back to an office. And so we want to make it so that you feel comfortable using your computer both for work and for home. And I think that is going to be a really interesting line to walk.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a brief mention of how if you're not docking, you should be docking.
Yes.
And one of the things that came with that, though, was Windows kind of memory of how you have things set up on your different devices. I am a Mac user and have been for a long time, but that idea of if I've got these split screens set up how I want them, and I've got them, just so, where I plug in again and it kicks back off where I was, is really interesting. On its own, a great feature, but when you pair it with this, if you look at Microsoft's own devices, you see kind of how they see their devices or their operating system being used. And they really are all about this hybrid switch between this, switch between that context, not only with the software, but with the hardware. So do you think that this speaks to a continuation of the convertibles and portables that Microsoft makes itself and that some third-party manufacturers also make?
Maybe. I mean, I think that they realize that for a lot of people, again, getting back to this hybrid work situation, right? A lot of people now I've got 2 work laptops sitting here. I admit I'm somewhat of a nerd, but I would at least have one in addition to the one I own, right? And I think what they realize is that people are, with this whole work from home thing that's been going on, people are getting big monitors, right? People are getting all sorts of peripherals. And a lot of people sit on their their living room couch or on their dining room table, and they plug in their mouse and everything. It's really annoying. It's all over the place. And Microsoft says, look, a lot of you can make this a lot easier on yourself. Use a dock, use a really nice monitor, and suddenly it's a lot easier to use. And I think that's part of why they also moved the start menu to the middle of the screen, is that it's a lot easier for you to mouse your way down to the bottom of the screen when it's in the middle than all the way to the left side. And it's kind of that modernity thing, right? Like a lot of people were using monitors with their laptops, but I imagine, I don't have the data, but I imagine it's gotten way bigger now that a lot of people are working from home.
Absolutely, yeah. And the touch target switching, whenever you undid the device they were showing, and then the icons would spread out a little bit. And yeah, just those little touches and details that were really cool, I think, for them to show off. I guess my last question for you was just, was there anything else that took place during this announcement other than the buffering that kept happening that stood out to you, or anything else from this Windows 11 announcement that you want to share with the viewers here?
Yeah, one thing I'm really curious to see how people respond to is that Microsoft's going to have a requirement that is very interesting, specifically with Windows Home. There's another talk of this TPM situation, which, for the ultra nerds out there, right? The trusted computing programming and all of that. But that's a side issue. I think what's really interesting is that with Windows Home, right, the kind of entry-level version, which Microsoft said is the most widely used, they're going to require you to effectively activate your Windows. And you'll have to have an account on Microsoft. You're going to have an internet connection to get this computer even running the first time. After that, you can do whatever you want. But Microsoft wanting to do that, they said, look, we want to be able to keep track of how your safety is doing, how many software upgrades you've got. They say that a lot of times when they get requests for support, software updates and security updates are the number one thing that aren't being done. So in a lot of ways, this is their attempt to try and fix that. But it also means that I'm ball and chaining myself a little bit more to Microsoft than I might have before. Yeah,
you're going to have to be it's like when you get those annoying pop-ups to update, and you're like, I don't really need you to tell me that. I know I have an update. Of course, I always, and I'm sure you do too, as a technologist, always encourage people update their software. So in that way, I'm kind of happy about this. But with that came the announcement that there would only be one new feature pack that goes out each year. The updates will slow down significantly, which I think is, I have a feeling a lot of people in IT are very happy about that. But yes, there is certainly an issue where these devices are going to need to be connected. And of course, there's always going to be some situation where someone needed to start up a new computer and they completely forgot about needing the internet connection, and they're out in the middle. I don't know, they've gone hiking and they just want to watch this show on their convertible Windows machine, and they can't.
I do that all the time.
Can't get the thing started. Those things happen all the time. Very rare. Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us today to talk about Windows 11, especially given that the event just happened this morning. You graciously agreed to be on the show today, and I appreciate that. If folks want to follow you online and check out all your great work, where do they go to do so?
It is so easy. You can find me pretty much anywhere online under my username, Ian Sherr, spelled just like it always is, IANSHERR. And of course, I'm on CNET as much as I can be.
Well, thank you, Ian. We appreciate it. Alrighty, folks, I'm checking the time, and it looks like that brings us to the end of another episode of Tech News Weekly. We publish the show every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That's where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats across all sorts of different platforms. So whatever podcast subscription service thingy you use, you can follow us or subscribe depending on what verb they're using at the moment. And by the way, if you want all of our shows ad-free, you should check out Club Twit. For $7 a month, you get every Twitch show with no ads, including this one, And you get access to the Twit Plus bonus feed with extra content that you won't find anywhere else in the members-only Discord server. Yes, you can join us in the Discord server for all sorts of conversations and fun. You just head to twit.tv/clubtwits to check that out. Again, $7 a month, Club Twit. If you want to send tweets to me, you can do that at Micah Sargent. I'm at Micah Sargent on many a social media network. You can also check out Smart Tech Today later today and iOS Today tomorrow. And I should also mention that we are now doing a new-ish show. It's a newish feature for Twit, and it is called Tech Break. Tech Break is a way for you to stay updated with the latest in tech, and also just to kind of get a free-flowing bit of information about new gadgets that we might be checking out. Essentially, anytime one of us hosts has an idea of something that we want to share. So, for example, John McAfee being found dead yesterday, that was a tech break that Leo put together. So if that sounds interesting to you, and you aren't already subscribed to the Twit Bits feed, you should head to twit.tv/TB, very easy, Tech Break, TB. And from there, you can subscribe to that. Of course, thank you to everyone who helps out in the studio. Burke, thank you. John, especially thank you for helping me wrangle and get everything prepped for today, getting everything kicked off. And we will be back soon. So thank you for checking out Tech News Weekly today, and we hope to see you again next week. Goodbye.
You know what's fun? Android. You know what's even more fun, though? All About Android. That's my show, Jason Howell, along with my co-hosts Ron Richards, Florence Ion, and we welcome guests on each and every week from throughout the Android ecosystem, developers, Googlers, journalists, people who are all geeked out about the Android operating system. We tell you everything you need to know. Twit.tv/AAA every Tuesday. We'll see you there.